Hi, I'm Christopher Walker with Closely Observed English, and in this writing feedback video, I'll be looking at a student's attempt at a C2 Proficiency level essay. So before we look at the student's response, very important to consider what the content points are going to be for the essay. C2 Proficiency essays are pretty complicated, so it's going to take us a few minutes to get just to the content points. Unlike any other writing task at B2 First, C1 Advanced, or C2 Proficiency, there are, in fact, 4 content points that need to be addressed. In every other piece of writing that you do for any of the Cambridge exams, there are only 3 of them. So that is a very important start. There are 4 content points. So we need to look at the rubric first of all. So our rubric is over here, and we have 2 texts. The rubric says, write an essay summarizing and evaluating the key points from both texts. Use your own words as far as possible and include your own ideas in your answers. So before you can do anything, you have to read the 2 texts and you have to highlight the 2 points raised by each author. You need to be able to address those points in the response to be able to get the content marks. So let's take a look. So the first one is called throwing things away. Every week, many of us throw away a huge amount of stuff, ranging from packaging food and plastic bottles to old newspapers and junk mail. Fortunately, some, though not all, of this can be recycled successfully, and both governments and private citizens seem to be doing their best to ensure that this happens nowadays. We should be careful not to congratulate ourselves too soon, however, because whether enough is being done is highly debatable. For example, the vast numbers of plastic bags used, many of which are not biodegradable, damage the environment, most notably the oceans, where they endanger marine life. Okay, so if you need to, pause the video for a moment, have a look closely. Can you identify the 2 content points that need to be addressed here? Okay, so the first one is just here. Governments and private citizens seem to be doing their best to ensure that this happens nowadays, which is the idea of recycling. So that's the first content point, that governments and private citizens are trying to recycle as much as possible. The second point that's raised by this one is whether enough is being done is highly debatable. So we shouldn't be complacent. We should not congratulate ourselves too soon. So those are our 2 content points for the first text. We need to summarize those points in our response, and we need to evaluate or respond to them. The second text talks about communications technology, still in the context of waste. It seems that nowadays we keep electronic products such as mobile phones for only a short time, because we are bombarded with highly effective advertising that persuades us that we need to discard our present model in favor of the latest improved device. Our willingness to discard such products may also be a consequence of the dizzying pace of technological change. We can hardly be expected to be content to remain behind the times, and we naturally wish to keep up with the latest exciting features and developments in communications technology. Okay, so again, if you need to, pause the video for a moment and consider for yourselves what the 2 content points are going to be. Okay, so basically, it's a text made up of a few pretty long sentences, so that helps us to find what we're looking for. The first one is, we keep electronic products for only a short time because we're bombarded with highly effective advertising that persuades us that we need to discard our present model. So advertising encourages us to treat electronic products as disposable. It's the first content point. The second one is, our willingness to discard such products may also be a consequence of the dizzying pace of technological change. So rapid technological advances also contributes to this way of seeing technology or technological devices as disposable. Okay, so I've highlighted the content points in the first text in orange, and I've highlighted the ones in the second text in red. So now we're going to look at the student's response, which is over here. And we're going to, once I've read it, I want you to think about where the content points are addressed. Remember, they need to be summarized and evaluated in the response. Okay, so here we go. In the 21st century, it is common for the new electronic devices to become easily obsolete. As a consequence, the products are easily discarded, bringing negative impacts to the environment. This scenario happens because of the fast pace of technology, where the development of new products are constant and increasingly happening faster. There's also the factor of the societal pressure to acquire new items, since it brings value to the person's status. Therefore, the discussion of this matter is of great importance, since it reaches a great part of the world, affecting the people and also the global climate. Okay, so let's pause there a second. So this is our introduction. So we need to find links in the introduction to both texts. So do we? Let's have a look. New electronic devices become obsolete. That sounds like something from the second text. As a result, the products are easily discarded, bringing negative impacts to the environment. I think that's also connected to the second text. It happens because of the fast pace of technology, societal pressure to acquire new items. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's societal pressure. We were talking about advertising in the rubric rather than societal pressure, but I suppose advertising is related to a person's status. So we could say that that's okay. Okay, but I can't see anything in the introduction that links to the first text as such. Remember, the content points in the first text were about how governments and private citizens seem to be doing their best to recycle as much as possible, but that we shouldn't be complacent, second point, because we're probably not doing enough. Okay, so let's progress into the next paragraph. Firstly, the topic of the pace of technology should be noted. The industrial science is always improving, and with it comes the question of how old products should be dealt with. Some companies, like Apple, accept old products and give discounts for the customer to buy a new one. This helps the buyer to discard the item in a more effective way, since it will come back to the company and it will be reused. Although some companies are starting to think about the consequences of their products to the environment, not all of them do. This shows that there should be more pressure from the government, where they could make more legislations that holds the companies more responsible for the impacts they cause on the environment. Okay, so we are talking a little bit about the pace of technology again, so that's the second text. But I would say that there's a little bit more here from the first text, isn't there? Some companies like Apple accepts old products and give discounts for the customer to buy a new one. So that's kind of talking about the idea of recycling a little bit. But it's not really talking about the same sort of recycling. If we go back to the first text, it opens with this statement: every week, many of us throw away a huge amount of stuff, ranging from packaging for food and plastic bottles to old newspapers and junk mail. Here we're talking about technology and the idea of taking a product back to Apple because they accept old products and give discounts for them. I wouldn't say that's quite the same. And at the end of the first text, it also says, for example, the vast numbers of plastic bags used, many of which are not biodegradable, damage the environment, most notably the oceans. Okay, so still, it's not really connected with that. We have got this idea of the government. Remember, it's governments and private citizens, not so much companies. So there should be more pressure from the government, and we talk about more legislation. So, okay, that's kind of connected to the first text. So let's have a look at the next paragraph. Additionally, it should be regarded that the influence of society to replace the old technological products is also another important factor. Today, it is common to replace old products that have been working perfectly and that there was not an actual defect with it. One of the reasons for this to happen is that the products are not buyed solely for its usages, but also as a status symbol. The device can give a person a new position in society, and therefore there is a constant search to be always with more expensive and more famous product, even though there is not a reason for it, besides showing to peers that the person has affluence. Therefore, It's also important that society is aware of their contribution to the negative impacts on the environment and how choosing to buy new products constantly can be supporting negative measures to the world they live in. Okay, so this to me seems only connected with the second text. For example, here it's common to replace old products that have been working perfectly. Why? Well, the device can give a person a new position in society, and I suppose that's linked again to the advertising aspect. There's not really anything touching on the first text. And then we conclude. Accordingly, it is needed for the big companies to gather to discuss the problem of the current disposal of their products. How should it be done? Will it be easy for its customers? What is the environmental impacts of its discard? Those are questions that the government should position to companies that produce products with short livelihood or that support the fast obsolescence of their products. Likewise, it's also a responsibility of the customers to search for companies that produces easily discardable products and that are friendly to the environment. Okay, so there is a little bit here at the end, responsibility. I would change some of the words that are used here, but it kind of touches on the content of text 1 a little bit. Text 2, it touches on a bit, but there are rhetorical questions here, which means that the issues aren't being addressed. You're just raising the issues, not really talking about them. Okay, so now that we've had a look at the text, we can turn our attention to the writing assessment scale, which is over here on the right of the screen. And the first thing we're going to be looking at is the content. So to get a pass, we need to match this. So that's level 3. Minor irrelevances and or omissions may be present. Target reader is on the whole informed. Okay, well, for minor irrelevances to be the point, we'd be looking at getting probably 3 of the 4 content points and detailing them pretty well. I don't feel that that's been done. For band 1, it says irrelevances and misinterpretations of tasks may be present. Target reader is minimally informed. That's not true either. I do feel informed, certainly about the second text. I don't feel fully informed about both texts. So we're going to go for a band 2 in between the two. So in terms of the content, what could be done better? Well, for the C2 Proficiency essay, it's so essential that you know what the task is asking you. And I think that this candidate, this student, has done a pretty good job of addressing at least one of the texts, but it's crucial that you identify the 2 content points in each text, you summarize them, and you evaluate or address them in your own way. Once you know to do that, you can start by moving from text 1 to text 2. What's the overall topic here? The overall topic here is waste management and recycling. So that would be the introduction. Introduce the topic of waste management and recycling. Now we're going to be looking at 2 aspects of waste management and recycling. The first is, in text 1, how enormous amounts of stuff are being thrown away, that governments and private citizens are doing quite a lot to try to ameliorate that situation, but that we shouldn't be complacent because there's still so much rubbish going out there that it's an enormous problem. Then we could say there is another side to the problem, which is the idea that so many of our technological devices seem to be designed to have a short lifespan. That would address the first point. We are advertised to such an extent that we think that this is natural. And we are also perhaps confused or at least distracted by the rapid change in the quality of technology, so that we are always thinking that newer equals much better. And this also encourages us to discard our products before they come to the end of their natural lifespan. Okay, so that would then cover all of the content points. And you'll notice that just by reframing what we're talking about, we can go from a band 2 in content up to a 4, maybe even a 5, depending on how well the points are all addressed. So that's something that can come with practice in only a couple of weeks. And there aren't many other things like that as we look through the other points that will get us there. Okay, so I'm going to clear my labels here for the content because we're moving on to communicative achievement. So communicative achievement looks at, first of all, the genre of the writing. Have we got ourselves an essay here? Well, we have. We have a piece of argumentative writing that tries to summarize the points raised in the text and tries to evaluate them to some extent. For a band 3 on communicative achievement, it says uses the conventions of the communicative task with sufficient flexibility to communicate complex ideas in an effective way, holding the target reader's attention with ease, fulfilling all communicative purposes. Have we got that? Well, we've definitely got the conventions of the communicative task. It is an essay and it follows the rules of an essay. But is there sufficient flexibility? Possibly. Do we see complex ideas? Probably not. We've got, well, this idea of person status, I suppose, takes the idea of advertising a little bit further than we had just in the rubric itself. So I think that's a very positive step. So that's good. Are these complex ideas communicated in an effective way? They're quite effective. I think that what's missing from this essay to make the ideas more complex and more effectively communicated is a method of addressing the ideas. We've got solutions to problems before we've really got an idea of what the problem is in some cases. Like this idea of how old products can be dealt with. We go straight in to Apple accepting old products, giving us a little bit more of an introduction to the problem of discarding technological products, and then addressing this possible solution, but then giving the limitations for the solution. That would be a good framework, those 3 steps. Introduce the problem, contextualize it, offer a solution, tell us the limits to that solution. And then also for band 3, we need to hold the target reader's attention with ease. There are times where you have to work a little bit harder to try and draw out the ideas from the text. So again, I'm going to go for a band 2 because it's better than band 1, which uses the conventions of the communicative task effectively to hold the target reader's attention and communicate straightforward and complex ideas as appropriate. Some of the ideas are more straightforward than complex because they're not dealt with in sufficient detail. So I would say we're looking at band 2. Organization, again, let's start for band 3 and work our way from there. Text is a well-organized, coherent whole using a variety of cohesive devices and organizational patterns with flexibility. Okay, so we're going to go a little bit more slowly here because I want to look in detail at the text. So in the 21st century, it is common for the new electronic devices to become easily obsolete. As a consequence, good, that's a linking term that goes back to the first sentence. The products are easily discarded, bringing negative impacts to the environment. This scenario happens, good, because of the fast pace of technology, where the development of new products are constant and increasingly happening faster. There's also the factor of the societal pressure to acquire new items, since it brings value to the person's status. Therefore, the discussion of this matter is of great importance since it reaches a great part of the world, affecting the people and also the global climate. Now, in terms of organization, you can't do much better than this first paragraph. There are mistakes, but they're not organizational mistakes. It's a nicely ordered introduction. Then we start with the interparagraph link. Firstly, the topic of the pace of technology should be noted. Okay, reasonably nice use of passive here. The industrial science is always improving, and with it, so it connecting to the idea of improving, I suppose, comes the question of how old products should be dealt with. This is good, actually. I mean, maybe not we could say how old products should be dealt with, but it's good because it's not a question. And one problem that a lot of people slip into here is when they see a question word like how, they immediately use inversion for a question. So they might say, how should the old products be dealt with? But this isn't a question. Candidate's got it right. That's both good language and good organization at the sentence level. Some companies, blah, blah, blah. This helps the buyer. Good. And we've got since. We'll come back to the company and it will be reused. Although some companies are starting to think about the consequences of the products of the environment, not all of them do. This shows that there should be more pressure from the government, where they could make more legislations that holds the companies more responsible for the impacts they cause on the environment. Okay. Additionally, maybe it's a typo, so it should be additionally rather than additionally. So it's good that you've linked the paragraph, but it's a shame that the word itself is spelled wrong. So it should be regarded that the influence of society to replace the old technological products is also another important factor. Today, it is common to replace old products that have been working perfectly and that there was not an actual defect with it. Okay, now this with it, well, we're looking at products, which are plural. So you can't link back to a plural with a singular linking word with this it, with the pronoun. In fact, we don't need one, do we? Products that have been working perfectly. This is actually organization, the use of that for a relative clause. That have been working perfectly and that there was not an actual defect with. That would be enough because you have that as the relative pronoun. It links to the old products and you don't need to link to the old products again with it or them because you've done it with the relative pronoun that. So that's enough. We don't need any more. One of the reasons for this to happen is that the products are not buyed solely for its usages, but also as a status symbol. The device can give a person a new position in society, and therefore there is a constant search to be always with the more expensive and more famous product, even though there is not a reason for it besides showing to peers that the person has affluence. Now, there are plenty of little mistakes here on the language side, but I want to point out that this is a very nicely structured, long sentence. Let's just look at it again. The device can give a person a new position in society, and therefore there is a constant search to be always with the more expensive and more famous product, even though there is not a reason for it besides showing to peers that the person has affluence. Okay, so we could question the word choice, and I will, but that's a good 3-line sentence. And this is actually part of organization, the idea that you can use things with flexibility to give a longer sentence rather than everything being short. Okay. Therefore, it's also important that society is aware of their contribution to the negative impacts on the environment and how choosing to buy a new product constantly can be supporting negative measures to the world they live in. Good. Accordingly, it is needed for the big companies to gather to discuss the problem of the current disposal of their products. How should it be done? Will it be easy for its customers? What is the environmental impact of its discard? Those are questions that the government should position to companies that produce products with short livelihood or that support fast obsolescence. Likewise, it's also responsibility of the customers. Okay, so I would say that the organization of this text is pretty strong. This text is a well-organized, coherent whole using a variety of cohesive devices and organizational patterns with flexibility. I would agree with that. Can we go higher? Text is organized impressively and coherently using a wide range of cohesive devices and organizational patterns with complete flexibility. I wouldn't say we can go that far. And part of it comes back to the communicative achievement and the content, which is that to achieve the highest marks in organization, the text itself needs to have clever or complex ideas that are presented coherently. They need to then be organized coherently, but the two kind of go hand in hand. So it's a little bit like a catch-22 situation. If you've not got that, you can't have this. If you want this, you need to have that as well. So I'm going to say that we're looking at a band 3 going up towards band 4. There we go. Right, so let me clear the text a little bit because this brings us to the language component, which is always a sticking point at C2 proficiency level because so much is demanded of students. It's not an easy thing to do to get a high mark for the language. So we're going to start by looking at the aspects of band 3. Uses a range of vocabulary, including less common lexis, effectively and precisely. Uses a wide range of simple and complex grammatical forms with full control, flexibility, and sophistication. Errors, if present, are related to less common words and structures or occur as slips. So I'm going to go through. I'm going to highlight just the lexis first, the vocabulary items that I think are used incorrectly or inappropriately or without control. In other words, there are spelling problems. There are lots of problems with articles throughout the text, but I'm going to leave those for the time being. Okay, so here we've got easily obsolete. You can't have something become easily obsolete. Something is designed to be obsolete or is obsolete. Maybe rapidly become obsolete. Maybe we could work on the position of the adverb instead. We've got easily again. So that's a repetition that we can avoid simply by changing it to something that's, I mean, everything is easily discarded. It doesn't matter about electronic devices. Readily would be better. Discarded is okay, but it's not quite, maybe it's not quite what we want. Bringing negative impacts to the environment. Increasingly happening faster. Accelerating, perhaps. Societal pressure is good. Value to the person's status, okay. Reaches a great part of the world, affecting the people and also the global climate. Affecting people everywhere, perhaps. We don't know which the people you're talking about. The industrial science, we want just industrial science, is always improving. And with it comes the question of how the old product should be dealt with. Some companies accept old products and give discounts for the customer to buy a new one. Okay, so actually this is kind of organization, but it's maybe grammar as well. We've got old products, but then new one, singular, so plural going to singular. Okay, this helps the buyer to discard the item. Now, I thought that was a slip at first, but it's repeated later. It's item with an M. In a more effective way, since we'll come back to the company, it will be reused. I'm not sure if that's actually true, but we'll leave it for the language side. Although some companies are starting to think about the consequences of their products to the environment, not all of them do. Do we think of that? Consequences of their products to the environment? I think here we've got the idea, so it communicates, but I'm not sure if it communicates effectively. This shows that there should be more pressure from the government where they could make more legislations. Legislation here would be general, so singular, that holds the companies more responsible. We could say holds the companies to account. Do we cause impacts? No. You have an impact or make an impact. I don't think you really cause an impact, do you? No. Additionally, it should be regarded that the influence of society to replace the old technological products is also another important factor. Influence of society, possibly, but if we were looking at advertising, which was in the rubric, it would be influence on society. It's not buyed, so maybe a slip, should be not bought. Solely with an L for its, and usage. Operation, maybe, or how it's used. Usage is the means, correct or otherwise, by which you use something. And we think about it more to do with, in language, we talk about the right word for the right context, and that is the usage of the word. Status has an apostrophe, but it's not possessive, so little thing there. So there is a constant search to be always with the more expensive and more famous product. Now, the product isn't famous. The brand might be famous. The product, to an extent, yes, but it's more about the product as a status symbol, isn't it? So, I mean, the product itself is not famous. My phone would be famous if I was, if I had it in my pocket and then somebody shot me, and then I was like, oh, the phone saved my life. That particular phone would then be famous, but it's not a famous phone. Can you see the meaning there, the difference? Also, we've got this little problem here, constant search to be always with. always with, you mean to always have, perhaps, even though there is not a reason for it, blah, blah, blah. The person has affluence. Has affluence, maybe is affluent, is more likely. Negative impacts to the environment, and how choosing to buy a new product constantly can be supporting or can support. Are they negative measures to the world they live in? Negative effects, we could say. The negative outcomes, certainly. It is needed, so it is necessary for the big companies to gather to discuss the problem of the current disposal of their products. I mean, this is not so much the language, but it's getting away from what you were talking about a little bit. You were talking about how people are encouraged to get rid of things, but now you're saying, well, once they've gotten rid of them, what are companies doing to make sure that they dispose of things in an environmentally managed way, which is a different topic, which means that the language itself is not quite appropriate for what we're looking at. Will it be easy for its, no apostrophe, customers? What is the environmental impacts of its discard? No. Disposal we've already had, so if you wanted something else, you'd need a clause here, so for its discarding of such products, we could say. Those are questions that the government should position, maybe posit, you were looking for, to companies that produce products with short livelihood. Now, livelihood is what you do as a profession. Usually I'm teaching, I'm a teacher by that's my livelihood. We were thinking here of maybe short lifespan, or that support the fast obsolescence. Those two don't go together, of their products. Likewise, it's also the responsibility of, not the customers, to search for companies that produces, so we've got companies, plural, and produces, singular, easily discardable products, and that are friendly to the environment. Again, I don't think this is right for what the context is, which is that we shouldn't discard things so easily. So why search for things that are easily discardable? So maybe it's the wrong word, or it could be interpreted as the wrong word. So coming back to the assessment frames, where does that leave us? Well, if we look at band 1, uses a range of vocabulary, including less common lexis appropriately. Maybe at times occasional errors, but it's more than occasional. So I'm going to say that this is looking at kind of band 1 sort of area. Okay, so that's the assessment done. Where do we stand with this essay? Overall, it's not a bad essay. I mean, it's readable, and when you consider that this is not the candidate or the student's native tongue, it's a really good piece of work. I mean, it's the sort of thing that shows a lot of learning and a lot of long-term effort building language. So that's really positive. But it also shows the massive difficulty that comes with the C2 Proficiency exam. If we look again at the assessment frames, band 3 at C2 level is the equivalent of band 5 at C1 advanced. And reading this, I feel that we're in the company of a good C1 advanced student. There is such a difference to go from C1 to C2. I would say that the difference as you go through the grades is actually logarithmic or exponential rather than just a straight line. Going from B1 to B2 is a big step up, but B2 to C1 is a very big step. C1 to C2 is a huge step. Some people never make it because it requires such an investment in time, resources, and energy. This is not bad writing. It communicates very well. But in the C2, if you look at what you need for a band 5, there's a lot of work to be done. I'm not saying that means that this student should give up. This student has a lot of potential. The content can go up very quickly with the right approach. Bringing the content up would also help with the communicative achievement. The organization's already strong. The language is the weakest point here, but that's by definition because you have to do so much. For example, for band 5 for language, it says any inaccuracies only occur as slips. So that means every word needs to be rightly chosen, correctly chosen. all of the mistakes are just, I'm in a rush, it's an exam, and that's it. Phew, what a standard to hold yourself to. Okay, so that was a C2 proficiency essay. There's a lot to it, isn't there? My goodness, can you imagine doing all of this writing, identifying the point, doing the writing with control, all in what, 45 minutes, more or less? Wow, it's hard. Keep trying, keep your chin up, work, and improve. And on that point, I shall see you next time.